All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the West Essex School Board to order. Ms. Steele, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Suzette, would you please call a roll?
Yes. Mr. Becker.
Here.
Mr. Keller is delayed, but should be arriving soon. Mrs. Carr. Here. Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Burns.
Present.
Mrs. Kaiser. Here. Ms. Steele. Here. Mrs. Lee. Here. President Lee.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any modifications to the agenda this evening?
Yes, we do this evening. I'd like to ask the board to consider not taking action on the final budget and tax levy at this time. It would typically be the last regular meeting in October. And there's one more Monday in October. So sometime between now and then, we'll schedule hopefully a special meeting. And the reason for this is with the proposal that's embedded in the budget and the tax levy for recreation to lease lane. The mailer that we intended to have out and thought it would land about a week ago, start what we recognize as landing today for most residents. And that was a large mailer, quite an expense, but to limit the expense, we did it in bulk rate. And what we learned, unfortunately, after the fact is that given the political season, the post office can prioritize which bulk mailings go out, and during the political season, they prioritize all of the postcards we get. And so our mailer was delayed because of that. And that's unfortunate, but it was the right thing to do to try to get the word out. And so what we're asking is that the board will go through the presentation this evening, have the conversation about the details. Again, it's one more opportunity for anybody in the public to learn more. Then this gets recorded, so it's available during the coming days. And it allows us to get a little more sense of what questions people in the public have about this particular proposal. You know, on the administration side, we feel it's entirely the right direction to head for a number of reasons, but we do want to have the opportunity to answer questions that people may have. And so we have the QR code. We've updated the website with the information that the decision will be made at some point in the days before or up to October 31st. And again, just anybody that's watching, if you have questions, you can go on to our website or scan the QR code. It takes you into a Google document where you can submit questions, and then we start to answer those and share them back out so everybody can see them. So that's a long explanation for a short change, but that's the request this evening.
Okay. Yeah, so that sounds like a plan. So with that, we'll move right into the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. So we'll start with 6.1, legislative update. So Wisconsin state and local tax burden is the lowest level in at least a generation. So this is from the Wisconsin Policy Forum. As the pandemic and the resulting recession hit in 2020, Wisconsin state and local tax burden fell to its lowest level in at least a generation. And new data from the U.S. Census Bureau show that despite the decrease in tax revenues as a share of income in Wisconsin, the state's tax ranking compared to other states actually became somewhat less favorable. That's likely due to tax collections in other states being hit harder by COVID-19. So Wisconsin's tax burden, however, remains below the national average, despite the state receiving less from fees and federal aid. And there's a link to the report where that's drawn from that's available. A record state surplus has been confirmed. The state of Wisconsin ended its fiscal year on June 30th, 2020 with a record positive balance of $4.30 billion, according to the new state annual fiscal report released by the State Department of Administration. The report also confirms that Wisconsin has a record $1.37 billion in its budget stabilization fund, also known as the rainy day fund. Again, there's a link to an article there. DPI releases district certified 2022-23 general school aid amounts. So that was done just last week or the days before. Department of Public Instruction released the certified general aid school aid amounts. And this is what each school district will receive during the current 2022-23 school year. By law, the DPI must certify these amounts by October 15th of each year. So general school aids are the largest form of state support for pre-K-12 schools in Wisconsin and are based on student counts and year-end financial data from the prior school year. The bulk of general school aid comes in the form of equalization aid, which is distributed according to a formula that takes into account local differences in property wealth per pupil. And those final numbers are what Aaron will get into later with why the final budget differs from the projected budget, right? Because those numbers come in late, and that's just how the system works in Wisconsin. So although the overall amount of general aid being distributed is higher than last year, because the way the equalization aid formula affects the distribution of general aid, not all districts will share equally. So of 421 public school districts in Wisconsin, 295 will receive more aid than last year and 121 will receive less. Number of revenue limit referenda in 2022 reaches an all-time high. So there'll be 42 school districts with referenda on the November 8th, 2022 ballot seeking authority to increase revenue limit authority. That's in addition to the 50 such questions that have already gone before school district voters this year. We believe the 92 referendums seeking additional operating revenues is the highest total ever in a single calendar year. So the highest previous total in a calendar year was 82, and that was set back in 2000 and equaled again in 2001. And then finally, report unfunded special education costs burden Wisconsin school districts and divert funds from general education for all students. So a new report from the Educational Law Center finds Wisconsin school districts collectively faced a bill of $1.25 billion in unfunded special education costs in 2019 to 2020 during that school year, even after accounting for state special education reimbursement and federal IDEA funds. And when we use the language unfunded special education costs, it doesn't mean that we're not providing the services that are required for students that have IEPs. We're just paying for it directly out of Fund 10 rather than having it fully reimbursed. We only get partial reimbursement for those unique special education needs, but we provide the services and it just comes from a different place in the budget. Going on to 6.2, Board of Education recognitions. So Governor Tony Evers and Attorney Josh Call recognized October 16th to the 22nd as Safe Schools Week in Wisconsin and highlighted efforts to promote school safety across the state through new school and community safety investments, as well as the ongoing work of the Office of School Safety. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our safety team. This team uses resources from the Wisconsin Department of Justice to review potential concerns or threats that occur in our schools. And school safety is always our top priority. And they use those reviews to implement plans and to mitigate threats. And what I like to use is really a phrase that I picked up from the director of school safety in MPS many years ago. He was a retired police lieutenant from Milwaukee and then joined MPS, Pete Pachowski. And his phrase was learning first, safety always. And so I think that is the right. So learning has to come first, but you never forget that school safety. And again, today our hearts go out to schools in St. Louis, where there was another school shooting. And so we're reminded yet again how important safety is. So a communication recognition to our schools that joined us last week. That was amazing hour last week for a school showcase, the board workshop. So that was FLW, Lane, Hale, Dotke, and Pershing. Oh, I did miss one of the recognitions. Thank you. So thanks to Deb Groff, Pershing's building substitute, for always going with the flow. We appreciate you and all of our building substitutes because they're juggle every day in something new. So we appreciate what they do for us. 6.3, just a couple updates and information items. So response to public comments. There were no comments at a regular board meeting on October 10th, so there's nothing to follow up on there. Couple updates on school consolidation. So we are beginning the first round of staff meetings in each school, and that includes schools that are consolidating or schools that are receiving new students next fall. The meetings will focus first on the staff transition process because that's really what teachers are most curious about. But also what are the events that are planned for parents, for students in the community. This week, we actually start tomorrow morning at Lane, and then we'll be at Longfellow on Wednesday and Pershing on Thursday. And then there will be similar meetings coming for parents in the future. And there'll be several rounds of staff meetings as this process rolls forward because there'll be rounds of staffing that need to take place. We also continue to explore the various uses of other vacant school buildings, as well as explore options for permanent administrative offices. So like I mentioned earlier in the request to adjust the agenda a bit, Today, the board will consider a proposal from Recreation to lease Lane and create a second recreation and fitness center. But now the decision will be made on or before October 31st. But following that decision, we'll take steps to consider uses for other vacant buildings and Lane as well if necessary, depending on the direction the board wants to set. So one of these steps is scheduling a meeting with the City of West Allis Department of Economic Development. So they reached out to me. So we're going to have a conversation with them. And it really is about sharing our current brainstorming about the various ideas that have been percolating. Following that, we'll schedule a workshop with the board to share that conversation and the various ideas. And it really will be an opportunity for the board to give some direction on where we should start putting some energy about the various reuses of, depending again on the decision around Lane and then Longfellow, Madison, and then permanent admin offices. And then just other quick updates. So this is a short week with Friday notice as a spring break on our calendar, and then Monday is a professional development day for us. And I thought it just might be interesting for the board and the community to learn a little bit about the history of this idea of small break at the end of October. And it really comes from a time when Wisconsin Education Association, so the state teachers union, used to host a very large professional development conference. It's always 2 days, the last Thursday and Friday in October, and one year it would be in Madison, the next year it would be in Milwaukee. And thousands of teachers from across the state would attend that. So there are always 2 days of professional development offered for teachers by our teachers union. And when Act 10 happened, unions made a number of changes because of costs and some of those things associated with a big conference like that. And so that conference was dropped. But many school districts continue with a fall break of some kind. So today actually was a fall break for MPS. Ours happens to be Friday, and then Monday is a PD day. So some of that tradition continues, but I just thought it might be interesting to understand kind of what the legacy is around fall break at the end of October. And so we'll continue with that as we plan next year's calendar as well. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we will move on to item 7, our public comments. For anyone who wants to address the board, you will have 3 minutes to do so. Please start by stating your name and your address. There will not be any conversation or discussion back and forth with the board, but if there is a question or some statement that we can answer directly and quickly, we will do that at that time. Otherwise, you will have a response to your comment by the next regular Board of Education meeting, either during the board meeting itself, during the superintendent's report, or personally sent via email or some other method if requested. So if you would like to address the board, there is a link that is posted in the chat if you're watching via Zoom. And if we do have one person signed up right now, so we'll start with that individual, Mike Zarling.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All right. My name is Mike Zarling. I live at 1119 South 110th Street, just one street away from Lane. So, all right. Can I begin?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. So my name is Mike Zarling. I'm a resident of West Dallas, live just one street away from Lane with my 3 children who are 4, 7, and 11, and we are members of Living Hope Lutheran Church. I'm here today to make public Living Hope our interest in the Lane Intermediary School. Our group is the combined West Dallas churches. We've just joined recently in February as Good Shepherds, Woodlawn, and Jordan churches. It's hundreds of members of the West Dallas community, citizens, and these organizations have operated and served West Dallas for over 100 years. While we have previously submitted an offer to purchase the building to the board privately, we believe we needed to make our offer public so that all options for Lane can be considered. We have previously requested a meeting with the board to discuss our offer, but so far have been declined. We respectfully request that the board, we would ask the general public as well to give us fair consideration. We would like to publicly state that, among other things, our offer increases the tax rolls by returning our several properties that we have around the city, which are currently exempt from tax rolls. It is also compliant with the current zoning of the site, which I'm told that the rec center is not currently by the city of West Dallas, perhaps under that current zoning. And it provides more money to the school district, the physical offer that was made. The rec department proposal does not offer any of these benefits, but we don't want anyone to think that our offer denies the general public from using and enjoying the Lane facility for their own use and enjoyment. We are happy to open up the facility and have many conversations around this for open gyms, exercise classes that are open to the general public, still a voting poll station, and many other public uses. The actions of any long-term successful organization such as your school board are based on considering multiple options. So we hereby ask that the board consider and thoroughly review any non-school district offers such as ourselves for the use of Lane to ensure the highest and best return is provided to the school district and the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, there's no one else signed up currently for public comments. I'll just wait a few seconds in case someone joined Zoom late. If you did join Zoom late, there's a link in the chat for signing up for public comments. All right, seeing no one else sign up, I will close public comments at this time, and we'll move on to item 8, our board reports, starting with 8.1, which is a review of the board calendar. So today is Monday, October 24th at 6 p.m. We have our regular Board of Education meeting, which will include a final budget and tax levy presentation, but we will not be taking action on that item this evening. And then we have a financial stability and efficiency workshop immediately following. Then on Monday, November 14th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting, immediately following a closed session meeting. On Monday, November 21st at 6 p.m., we have a financial stability and efficiency workshop meeting, 22-23 technology department update and review of district technology plan. And then on Monday, November 20th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting with a closed session following immediately. I also note that there will be a special meeting noticed sometime soon between now and the 31st of October, where we will take action on the budget and final tax levy. Moving on to 8.2, our board committee reports. Let's start with 8.2.1, employee engagement and culture. Mr. Keller.
Okay, thank you. We met October 11th. We went over one of the things that we've been trying to get some information on is parental leave and what those options might look like. We haven't been able to get the data that we've been looking for yet, in part because We Trust is going out of business. So we are still working on getting some of that information. We went over the PD calendar for the year just to confirm those dates and talk through that a little bit. And then we got some safety committee updates. We talked a little bit about the training that all district personnel are assigned to. Talked about some signage regarding to fire extinguishers and AED signage, and looking at the possibility of flock cameras for some of our areas as well.
Okay. All right. Very good. Any questions for Mr. Keller or his committee?
What's a flock camera? I can share a link with everybody that will.
It's a technology
information,
that reads license plate numbers more accurately. And it was advised to us by the West Dallas Police Department. They've been using them in areas that are a little more active. And we've had some catalytic converters disappear from parking lots recently. So it may be something that helps us in that regard. Yeah.
Help keep our parking lots and areas safer a little bit.
Any questions or something to consider for future agenda items? I said one question about the family benefit. So I presume we were going to try to go through, we had to get that benefit. Are we looking elsewhere or?
Yeah, I think the goal is to look other places. We were just trying to get some of that data so that we could see what made sense and how to pursue it. And we'll continue to kind of dig into that. So we'll share any updates with you.
Very good. All right, seeing no other questions, move on to 8.2.2, financial stability and efficiency. Ms. Kaiser.
Thank you. At the October 22nd Financial Stability and Efficiency Committee, we discussed the following: the 2022-23 budget certification, which you're going to hear about in mere moments. We have noticed that there's a significant increase in private vouchers, which will see more money being paid out of our budget and a decrease in open enrollment in. We're discussing sending out a survey or public session so we can learn more about what is appealing about where they've open enrolled to outside of West Dallas, West Milwaukee. We'll have a balanced budget. We will have a balanced budget due to healthcare costs and moving some roles in their salaries into Fund 50. Recreation proposal follow-up listening session has had a few stakeholders in attendance, but they're supportive of the proposal overall. And folks should have received a mailer today. regarding the rec department and lane proposal. Health insurance transition, there will be optional sessions for staff and retirees. That will begin the last week of October. Then Brown and Brown will be available to discuss changes in coverage. And OPEB update, we discussed the potential move of future retiree benefits to a defined HRA contribution. We've received the actuarial data from National Insurance Services and are developing proposals, recommendations that will be taken to the directors in the coming weeks with a formal board workshop tentatively in December.
Excellent. Any questions for Ms. Kaiser, her committee regarding her report? Or any future agenda items that you would like to see? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to 8.3, board member reports of community events. Any community events board members like to comment on?
All right. So I wanted to just do a shout out to our rec department. They had their first annual accessibility and disability resource fair, can't talk, on October 11th from 5 to 7. I was actually able to go, and it was really great. There were so many different organizations that were represented. I was really impressed. So definitely, hey, if you have a nonprofit out there and that's what you service in is like special education needs and stuff for both adults and children, I would encourage you, because I'm assuming it's an annual, that it will be next year also. But yeah, it was really great. I got some good information for my own family. So yeah, great job.
All right, thank you. Ms. Carr?
I actually went to Central's pep rally for their homecoming. And I had never been to actually Hale or Central's. And it was energetic, and it was one of those where you walked in and you could just feel that electricity in the room. And I have to say those seniors were the loudest. I think they earned their points. But I really enjoyed supporting that. And then I was asked to judge ice cream flavors at Franklin Elementary. And again, they're doing a project-based learning project. And, people always ask us about what is deeper learning and how is that part of our strategic plan. And there were, what I witnessed there, all of those deeper learning strategies were really embedded into everything that they did. The communication, the teamwork, the just taking such pride in their work and their academic mindset. There were so many of the things that we're looking for. And so we're seeing more and more evidence of that every time we go out into the schools. And so I wanted to do a shout out to them for being so advanced with that.
Awesome. What flavor won?
We don't know.
Oh, we don't know
But
yet.
there were 6 of them.
What was, you don't want to say your favorite?
You know what? And it was lovely because we actually gave them written feedback, warm and cool feedback, and they took that feedback and actually will now go and do another round
Oh.
before they actually present to Big Deal Restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
And they will actually have a flavor of the month with them. So
That's
this was a
nice.
pretty big,
That's cool.
pretty in-depth project. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Great partnership as well
Mhm.
with a local business. All right, anyone else with any community events they'd like to?
I
shout
didn't
out?
get to try any of the ice creams at Franklin, but I did see one poster for one. The name is Snow Day.
Mhm.
Oh.
And if they can top that, I'll be just blown away because it's just perfect. It's just great.
Yes.
And I probably need someone to back me up on this. There is a social media thing going on where you can vote for the best athletic
Mhm.
fields.
Yes.
We are in the finals, so everybody please go vote for our
Yeah.
district fields. That's a great
What
thing
do
that we'll be
we
recognized
win?
for.
Like what is?
$1,000
Oh,
for our
wow.
athletic program.
For your
you
athletic
were-
program.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's put on
I'm
by
on
the company that replaced the fields
Yeah.
for soccer and football. And so yeah, we are in the finals. You can vote once a day
From
per
different device.
device, essentially, and it's open for 4 days at this point. So there
I
is
can
some.
see- I can see Miss Lee over here like.
Hey, why would you say that?
Are any other items we'd like to shout out?
One more.
Mr. Becker?
I was fortunate enough to go to the Lane Middle School dance, the Glow Dance on Friday night. Thanks to the PTA for running it. The kids were pretty well behaved. It was pretty uneventful. It was a nice event. Yeah. It was fun to behave.
Yeah, nothing like middle school dancer, intermediate school dances. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add on to Joe. So this week, actually the next 2 weeks, we have a lot of events going on for our PTA. So just a shout out to all those volunteers that I know Madison's had a fall fest, there's harvest dances, there's a lot of stuff going on at all the different schools. So to all those parents and staff that work really hard to get that for our kids. Thank you.
Definitely echo that. Any other events? Very eventful last couple weeks.
Yeah, it has been.
Very good. And we'll have more of that as we get further into the school year. All right, so we'll move on to 8.4, other updates and information. That's my piece. Again, used to make updates on items that are happening in the district related specifically to board. I did make a comment last time about the offer that we had gotten from regarding Lane, and the response essentially was that Lane right now is not up for sale. Obviously, if the board decides to change that, we would have a request for all interested parties to make an offer. And at this point, that is not the case. So just want to reiterate that there because we do have public comment related to it. So I want to make sure that was noted. That happened at our last regular meeting. And then further update on our superintendent search. So we had our initial meeting with Rain Associates. All board members have been contacted by Rain Associates to do our individual kind of input of what we would like to see on our next superintendent. And we have meetings that will be coming up for the community to have input as well. So right now we have a meeting that will be scheduled for in-person on November 5th at 10:30 a.m. and that'll be held here at the 70th Street building on the 6th floor for community members to come in. And this will be moderated by Rain Associates to basically ask similar questions that we as board members were asked about what we want to see in our next superintendent. And then we have, there will be a virtual session on Monday, November 7th for teachers and staff to give similar input. Then we also have scheduled tentatively right now on November 7th for Youth Commission. We also are reached out, are working with the principals at both, or at all three, at Dodke, Hale, and Central to try and get the student leadership groups to be involved in that process as well. We're going to see if we can combine them. We'll have to see how schedules work out, but we're in the process of getting that figured out. And Ms. Carr, thank you for reaching out to the Youth Commission to see if they'd be able to participate as well. Then on Wednesday, November 9th, we have an in-person 9 a.m. meeting for district staff that will held here. And then also on the 9th, an in-person 4 p.m. session that will be for community members, parents, teachers, basically anyone, again, who want to do a different in-person session. There also is a possibility of November 10th, Thursday, virtual for student council for the high schools involved. So there will additionally be a community-wide survey that will go out. The link, we are looking to hopefully be sending that out tomorrow. This will go out to the email list that we have. So the people who have essentially opted in to getting district information via our email server, they will automatically get a link to the survey. And that's obviously go to all parents and staff as well. In addition, we will have a link to the survey that is on our website. We'll also post it out via social media. And this is limited to once for each IP address that we have. So again, if you have multiple people in your home that would want to take the survey, if you have difference, but we'd rather, if you can, as a family, kind of come to a decision if you have, it's not like a voting thing versus like, what do you want to see in that next superintendent? But for some reason, like, we got multiple different people with differing opinions. We want to have more than one survey per IP, that we can reach out to our communications, Dr. Stewart, to help facilitate that. And so that's where we're at with the process right now. And that's all that I have for that. Oh, sorry.
I just have info, it doesn't fall under community, more like informative. 18th of October, I attended a 2-hour workshop sponsored by the Wisconsin Association of School Boards on running effective meetings. I think privately we should talk because of some information I think I'd like to share with you on that I wasn't aware of
Oh.
for a meeting. And get a time when maybe you, me, and Mark can meet.
Okay.
I'd share that, but it was very informative.
Very good. All right.
It was at Davian's
Oh,
out in Menominee Falls.
Mhm.
It was a dinner, but I went for the workshop.
sure.
I don't eat fancy.
All right.
Thank you.
That sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Sikich. So closing that, we'll move on to our consent agenda this evening. We have item 9.1, approval of minutes from regular Board of Education meeting on October 10th and our board workshop minutes from October 17th. We have 9.2, our employment summary. Item 9.3, the supplementary contracts, and item 9.4, our financial summary. Does anything separated out? See none, look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. We'll move on to our action items this evening, starting with 10.1, approval of professional staff and support staff board policy updates from December 2021 as a second reading. Dr. Luxman.
Great, thank you. Yeah, this is the second reading and there were no questions coming from the first reading. Again, there was some recommended changes in this from Neola regarding clarity and level of responsibility. And then also it's just out of the normal sequence from, if you recall, we convened as a committee of the whole because this particular policy doesn't align with any one of the any one of the current standing committees, even though it's within the operations set of policies, it would normally go to the finance committee, but the content of it doesn't really align there. So we did it as more of a kind of the administrative way we adopt policy. So if you want to add anything
I
to
have
it.
nothing to add. It's terribly exciting.
It's terribly exciting. So we're happy to answer any questions.
So any questions that cropped up since the first reading? Anyone like to bring up? All right, well, if nothing, I would look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion or questions that maybe just popped into your head? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. And then we'll move to 10.2, our 22-23 final budget tax levy adoption, or in this instance, presentation. Mr. Norris.
All right, thank you. Like Marty's updates gave a good transition into this today with all the budget updates from the state. So
Mind if I run to the restroom?
oh, sure, go ahead.
You can get started. I know the budget.
There we go. So just to make a few comments before we get going and dive into the presentation. So today the presentation is a little more of a high level overview than what the board had saw about a month ago at the annual budget hearing. We are here today to answer questions. As President Lee mentioned, this is a discussion and a presentation around the final budget adoption and tax levy, and then also Ms. Strasser is here on behalf of Recreation to answer questions that you might have today too. So with that, we'll just kind of get started here. So throughout the calendar year, as each of you know, we work through the budget cycle and the process, and it really starts from the beginning of the year, which we'll be engaging with in a few short months. It's crazy to say, with high level projections regarding enrollment and staffing, and then really getting into revenue and expense projections. And in this budget cycle leading into 2024, one of those big projections is going to be what happens with the biennial budget. So every other year that becomes a item of discussion, and that will become an item of discussion as we enter into 2024. But as all of you are well aware, we do a significant number of workshops to the board to present what we believe at that time in the budget cycle. The assumptions are whether they're revenue or expenses, but as we proceed from the early fall into the spring into late summer, those projections become more concrete, less like Jell-O. It's kind of the idea. So that really, like I mentioned, starts in January, and that starts with the open enrollment and enrollment projections, which stems from our enrollment analysis, which leads us into February around the prelim budget and our staffing analysis. And then really from there, it turns into the late spring preliminary budget approval by the board. And then in the summer, we lead into annual budget hearing. So here we are today. Just a quick summary of how we got here. A lot of things go into it. I know you're well aware, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. So just to jump in here, we'll start with the main calculation with how the final certification comes through. So this really a few things that lead us to the final certification today are our membership, pupil count, equalization aid, as Dr. Luxman mentioned, and also the final certification in terms of revenue from the state. So the revenue limit authority is really going to consist of our number of members that we were able to count on our third Friday. Members are not the same as enrollment. They are similar, but not the same. Members include students who attend our schools and also students who are residents of our schools, but attend other public schools. So essentially our enrollments, we add our enrollments into the membership. We subtract out non-resident members, which would be open enrollment in students, and we add in open enrollment out students who are also members. So our membership always is higher than our enrollment, given that we have more open enroll out than in. Just kind of a quick summary. And then with the revenue limit authority, you also add in things such as non-recurring and recurring exemptions. And so what a non-recurring exemption is, would be we receive funds from the state in terms of declining enrollment. So the state allows us non-recurring exemptions to help us retain revenue while we decrease expenses over time, which is why membership is our revenue limit authority is based on a 3-year average. And so that is considered a non-recurring exemption. Leading into that, so then we receive on the 15th of October, our aid amount, and that number is subtracted from our revenue limit authority. Total authority gives us the total allowable tax levy. As I mentioned before, these final values were released on the 14th this year, 15th is a Saturday, which allow us to be here tonight with the final numbers. So our total revenue limit authority for the 22-23 school year is $92,122,793. In comparison, and each slide that I'll show you is structured similarly, so you can see what it is this year and what it was last year, with the amount changing both in percentage and in actual dollar amount. And so, as you may have assumed, given that our revenue limit authority is essentially constructed from our members, as our members continue to decrease, our total revenue limit authority should also decrease, which it has, as expected, at 1% this year, and a total net change of $956,693. Our equalization aid amount this year has increased. It's just over $361,000 in total change. And just something to note, because equalization aid, there's many factors that go into how this is calculated from the state. And one of the things that we don't know until the 15th is essentially there's one pot of money that the state has for equalization aid. And then if the biennial budget increases the pot, then more money can go to the schools, right? But the reason why it's unknown is that if a district that receives aid, which we do, doesn't spend all of the dollars that they're allocated in their budget, then they receive less aid the following year. It's called shared cost. And so I think Brendan, at a previous meeting, you had mentioned when we sold the building and we had a net receivable, and we didn't spend those dollars, we received less aid the following year. That is essentially why districts who receive aid, who are not in a healthy place in terms of their fund balance, are in they're in tough challenges, because essentially by saving money, they receive less aid, which then pushes the dollars that they saved to the community. So by having a healthy fund balance and by planning for the future, which this board has, you put yourself in a much better position. And so one of the things that has impacted this year, even though we did receive more aid this year, is that by us committing dollars that were unspent last year to future retiree benefits, which we have to do, we received less aid this year. But as we plan and we solidify a plan this year for future retiree benefits, we'll be spending those dollars, which will create an increase in aid. So I just want to make a note of that. And so that's why it's so important that in our budget today and across the news and across the state in coming months and weeks, you'll hear the amount of districts that are operating on fiscal cliffs using ESSER dollars. And as you already know, happy to report again, our budget has no fiscal cliff with an operating ESSER budget. We are using those dollars as board approved, but none of them are operating, meaning that there is no fiscal cliff we have today, which is, I'm very happy to report that. So that, taking the total revenue limit authority, subtracting out aid, produces the all funds tax levy, which is $40,194,962. In comparison, the tax levy in 21-22 shows just over a $30,000 decrease and just under a 1% decline. Please note that this tax levy does include an additional Fund 80 levy of 1.3 million from last year, which brings the total levy for Fund 80 under this proposal to 4.3 million. So just some updates, things that have changed from now from our annual budget hearing about a month ago. So there's a few reasons why in our prelim budget, we discussed the Fund 80 levy being set at additional $2 million as Ms. Strasser had in her proposal. And so some of the reasons why that was not possible, or that will not be the recommendation, is because part of that proposal was to, one, provide both a decrease to the mill rate and a decrease to the total levy. And so there are things, as Dr. Lux mentioned, that come through in the budget certification that are also unknowns beyond revenue and aid. Some of those things are private vouchers. So the first thing I want to mention is we receive both revenue and aid for students who attend. But if in the first year of an increase in private vouchers, the burden of the community for this $748,000 comes completely from the community. We, by receiving aid at about a 58% mark, every dollar we spend, the community only spends 42 cents and the state supplements that dollar with 58 cents. The $748,000 increase is directly from the levy this year. And as those students in January are counted, the following year we'll receive our 58 cents. I hope that kind of makes sense. So this is one of the reasons why when we looked at the prelim budget, we said $2 million would also allow the recreation proposal to decrease the levy. It was not possible because this is one of the factors that happened that we have, and I have a slide on this in a minute, but just a note. So you can see 21-22 was just over 4.2 million and 22-23 is just under $5 million for private vouchers. As I mentioned before, this proposal final budget also has an increase to the Fund 80 levy from 3 million to 4.3 million, a $1.3 million increase. It also includes, we received an additional year of Get Kids Ahead grant in $113,000. We received $712,000 in Governor Evers one-time money. We're using those dollars primarily to restore all school budgets 100%. Really happy to report that, using dollars to put them directly back into schools. Our principals were very, very happy last week when Dr. Wexman announced that to them. So that was very pleasing to hear. And then also factors such as open enrollment out expense, which is one thing, as Kristen had mentioned, where I think it's time for us to really dive in deeper to that, like we had a few years ago. And then really decrease revenue and open enrollment in. That's something that probably comes at no shock to you here today. As we consolidate schools, we essentially run operations more efficiently. And as the board has in its policy, open enrollment fills gaps in seats. So if there's 20 kids in a classroom and we fill to 22, we have 2 seats. Well, as you have essentially larger schools, the math comes out cleaner and you have less availability using the same formulas for open enrollment in. So I would imagine, unless pending board policy change, that will continue to happen. So those are the main kind of budget changes from the prelim to today. As I mentioned before, just the one thing to note, kind of in my opinion, an alarming statistic here is that our total levy, as I mentioned before, is just over $40.1 million, or just under 40.2. And our private vouchers is just under 5 million. So that, if just using the percentages here, that makes up about 12% of our total levy is from private vouchers. And I included the bottom here, the WPCP, it's the Wisconsin Parental Choice Program. That cap is set at 7%. Each year it increases by 1% up until it's 10%. So in a few years, that 10% cap, pending any state changes, it will become kind of, it can't go past that. So that will be helpful unless that's changed. But this is maxed out at the point. So this is the total private voucher amount is at 7% this year.
Right, that's statewide. So you're thinking
Yep.
of the difference between why are we above the 10% already? Well, it's because the 7% is statewide. So
Right.
districts can vary,
Mhm.
but there's a cap across the whole state.
So there's the breakdown of the levy here. So 32,576,452 is essentially what under this proposal would go to Fund 10. Our 3.3 million, $118,510 is our debt service. So it's 38 and our energy efficiency debt. And then the 4.3 million that I mentioned for Fund 80. Adding that up gets you to the total levy of $40,194,960. So then moving into the mill rate discussion. So the total levy divided by equalized property value multiplied by 100 produces the mill rate. And so the first thing is we get the value projected in the summer, and it gets certified on the 15th or the 14th this year. And the certification came through directly as projected, which is great, which is what we thought, which was really good to see. Coming to no surprise then today, the equalized property value has increased by about 14.7%. So the total equalized property value of all of our community is 6.1 billion, which is up just under $800 million. So the mill rate, including all the assumptions I mentioned, would be for 22-23, $6.58, which is a net decrease of just under $1 from last year, 755 to 658, which represents a 12.89% decrease in the mill rate for all communities. What does this mean for the average homeowner? So breaking that down by 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, you can see there that the average homeowner whose home's at 100,000 is $658. That's for the school-based proportion of the property tax. And multiplying that out, 200,000 would be $1,316. 300,000 would be $1,974. But the key here is what does it look like from last year to this year? So just to kind of go a little further, you can see that someone last year at a mill rate of 755 on a $100,000 home was paying $755, right? And you can see that their taxes in comparison to this year on that same evaluation would be decreased just over $100. And so to kind of have the breakdown here, one second. Yeah, so you can see that the total value of, the total school-based proportion of the property tax payments for each valuation of home will decrease substantially using the mill with the new mill rate. So with that, I would open it up for questions for Shelley or myself.
Any questions? I have a question.
Absolutely.
With the additional 1.3 million that's on the for the recreation budget,
yep.
The $6.58, how much of the 1.3 million, how many cents of the $6.58 makes up that 1.3 million?
Yep, it's 22 cents. So the average property taxpayer at 100,000, 200,000 and 300,000, it would be $22 more for them, 44 and 66 for the whole year. So if your value of your home is 100,000, that 1.3 million is $22.
Okay. And what is the amount again that the district will be receiving in rent for leasing of lane from recreation?
So the appraisal value, both in terms of sale and in lease, came through. So the leasing value is about $3.50 a square foot, which is around 440,000.
Would that amount change? I know this is something that would have to be annually approved by the board.
Yep.
But we're demolishing, the plan is to demolish a chunk of that building. So would that reduce the amount of rent because the square footage is being reduced? Or is it, we're talking about lot? Because we have building, right? And we have lot.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'd have to talk with John Shore. We just got that today. And so he's working through the lease, and we'll have a workshop with the board to talk through that at a later date, should it be approved. But at this time, the building that is for lease is 126,000 square feet. So that's at this point where I think we're at, but something for discussion for sure.
So if the board did approve that at the future, we'd be looking at $440,000 revenue for that year, basically.
Currently, and one of the things that was interesting is in the appraisal that came through is actually the smaller the size of the building, the higher the per square foot value was, because rental capacities for larger buildings are harder to rent. So you actually get less per square foot, more money. But it's kind of interesting. So the 350 is less than other area schools because Lane's a large building. So, yeah, but that's about what I came in at. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the board?
So today during public comment, you happened to be here, Shelley, and hear what he had said. Was there, could you address some of the things that he talked about? I heard zoning and how do you respond to his comments? Is there anything that you can say or?
Appropriate for me to respond to public comment. I guess if there's a direct question.
Do you think that there's a zoning issue for what we would want to do?
So I guess I would frame it similar to the current recreation center and the process that we have to go through or had to go through with that. I would think that process would apply to any leasing and or, construction we want to do. Once you have your plans, you submit them to the city. City holds a public hearing. It may require a special use permit depending on how it's currently zoned, but there's a process for that. And I would, like I said, I anticipate to be the same as we've gone through before.
Yeah, and one of the things I noted is that in the conversations with the city, and I think I've shared this way earlier on, one of their ideas for Lane was a potential entertainment venue. Right? And there are some models in different cities in the country that are taking old schools and turn them into really interesting spaces. Well, that clearly would take a change of zoning, right? So it is a part of the process, right? So we would simply follow the same course of action. Pat Connaughton's development company, right, the Milwaukee Bucks, they're just announced that they're proposing a big apartment building over on National, kind of across from the park where Franklin is. Well, that'll take a zoning change, right? So it's just a normal part of these kind of projects.
Historical perspective, the property that we're currently on did have a school at one time. It just did burned. So, and then never rebuilt on the property. So it's similar properties.
And the other thing that was mentioned was the sharing of the gym space, which is, I think, generous offer. That's an interesting thing because that is one, I think, for me, as we've worked through all of this, coming to realize just how valuable that gym space really is. But I think that offer would come with some risk that I'm not real comfortable with because we don't really then manage or are the board's not the final arbiter of if there's a conflict. Right now, if there's a conflict between what recreation wants to use it for and what athletics wants to use it for, you guys get to decide in the end. But if somebody else owns the building, they decide in the end. And even though, again, it's generous, I just want to say that for the public record. I think it comes with some downsides that I don't know that they understand how much use there is. Because when Shelley's presentation, I just pulled it back up. So, the average of 31 people, not students, are in that building participating in programming of some kind 365 days a year. We don't program it 365 days a year. So the actual number of bodies in there when it is programmed is much higher. Right? So it really is a high value space for us.
Dr. What's another key point there is the type of gym space. I mean, we have gyms in our district, we know that, but an elementary school gym is not appropriate for some of the programming, whether it's high school athletics, if they're displaced due to other school events and activities. So it's not necessarily always just a matter of more gym space. It's the type and quality of gym space that we really need and are looking for that Lane provides for us.
If I was just gonna make a comment on that. I was a membership person for Booster Club at Hale for a couple years. And I've actually watched coaches argue and to try to get space. We need gym space for our Husky, for our junior programs, for our regular athletics. I just don't see, I'm just saying, just from my point of view, I've seen like just people, right now we're kind of struggling sometimes for space. So I don't know like that. I'd be concerned about, a guarantee behind that because we really do need to be able to guarantee that our athletics, that we have the especially if we want to continue to grow. I know we've been working to attract kids back to some of our athletic programs, so we've got to have the space then for it.
Just Shelley and I look at each other because that was one of the biggest topics in our committee meeting. The recreation community is that is constantly a battle, you know, especially like at Hale, because, you know, we've got combined gymnastics and then the wrestling and then, you know, and then you've got your regular girls and boys basketball and you've got the junior Huskies and yeah, I mean, it's constantly, and like Shelley said, like for instance, like this year, my son's in 8th grade for junior Huskies. We've never had enough kids, unfortunately, to have 2 8th grade teams. This year we do, which is amazing, which means that we'll actually have hopefully 3 levels for high school next year, which is awesome. But because of gym space, you know, it's like, you know, to try and schedule, they're wanting to combine kids, which I totally understand, but trying to combine 2 8th grade teams at the size some of those kids are, to try and put 22 kids and 4 coaches in one gym is hard at that size and age, where it's like, if that has to be done, then it's kind of like, okay, well, we maybe be better to do it at a 3rd and 4th grade age, you know, and you definitely want to do 8th graders in like Mitchell's gym or Hoover's gym, you know, then it's almost like it has to be at least, you know, at an intermediate school gym, if it can't be at a high school, you know, because it does. I mean, it makes a huge difference to try and run an effective practice. I mean, it's, I never realized it was such a thing until my boys started playing it. Now I'm like, can I go into some of those gyms? And it's like, oh dear God, you know, I mean, it is, it's crazy, you know, or if you don't have hoops that are functioning and, you know, I mean, all sorts of things come into play. So yeah, gym space is like liquid gold in a sense, you know, so.
In a city, in an area without land,
Yeah,
you know, it's the question of if
Mhm.
not there, then where
right. Mhm.
and at what cost.
Yeah.
So it's regardless of which way we go, it's a question that would have to get answered and solved at some point.
Mhm.
And I just don't know. This seems to be at least a very effective cost way
Mhm.
to do it. So
Absolutely.
Other questions?
So I know initially in the proposal you were talking about, so you would lease for 4 years and kind of decide from there. Have you thought about what then would be, what you think, like what the rec department, if we would go through this, what would then after those 4 years, would you just re-examine it, or do you have an ultimate goal? Like, do you want to purchase it, or?
But we can't legally, we can't purchase from the district. We can't
Okay.
purchase from ourselves. So
Okay.
that's why the lease option.
Okay.
And yeah, we would like a long-term
Gotcha.
lease.
and part of that, I think, back to Noah's point earlier, there's some evaluation post renovation that would have to be done, you know, and things like that. To figure out kind of how that would look, you know, but yeah.
Any other questions? It's the last thing I just want to note is that the other thing that's a benefit to this is that the district is no longer under this proposal would no longer have to do upkeep for Lane. And so the $440,000 that we would get in rent lease payment is true $440,000. No subtraction from it. And that can go directly back into renovations needed in other buildings or increasing, you know, staffing, compensation, or whatever the board decides to do with those monies once we get them. So I think that's another important thing to note. We could sell the building and get more money maybe up front, but then we're still figuring out the gym space, and maybe that could, the monies we're talking about isn't going to solve any one building's problem when it comes to renovations. So we're still having to answer that question another way.
And just to note, I mean, similar to Brendan's point a month ago, if we sold the building, the board would need to spend the money. Otherwise, the levy's going up the next year.
True.
You know, so the 2 million we might receive after the levy goes up, the community might bear more of that being on them because it would be considered a deductible receipt. So it's just something else to consider. So.
All right, so we did move this vote this evening. Again, for anyone who joined late, the point was because we wanted to have that mailers in people's hands a week ago. It was delayed because of the post office, not because any fault of the districts. We definitely got it to the printers and to the post office. Should have been well in time to get in people's hands last week at the latest. And so that did not happen. They came today, most likely. Some may get them tomorrow, depending if there's any sorts of delays for individual people. But we have opportunities for comments and questions. There's a QR code on that flyer, that mailer that came out, as well as the ability to, I believe we'll have a link on our website as well for people to fill it out if they didn't get one or whatever. If they have questions or comments that they to do, we'll consider those obviously in our vote, and we will notice a meeting shortly to have that final vote taken, so we know where we're at. So with that, unless there's any other questions, comments, I think that we are going to move into our workshop. Do we need a recess? Someone just left. No? Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Norris. Thank you, Shelley, for being here. Ms. Strasser, I apologize. Thank you again for all the work. Definitely appreciate it. And any questions that come forward, I'm sure you guys will be answering. So thank you for that work as well. So we'll move into our workshop this evening. So 11.1 Financial Stability and Efficiency Workshop. Benefits update with Brown and Brown, and Mr. Norris is leading this as well. Let's move into
1 second. We're going to update this
microphone
quick.
area.
Well, thanks. I'll just get it kicked off. Thanks for having us again for a workshop. This is something we've had annually, and I felt like given the transition from We at Trust to United Healthcare and open enrollment beginning for both active and retirees, that there was no more important year to have it than this year. And so I know that you receive questions from staff, and this will be the year where we'll receive as many as probably we ever have, given the changes. And in the last board update, I included that we're having 4 informational sessions, both in the evenings, both on Zoom and during our professional development day. That way it's built into staff's, work day and also outside of it. So trying to meet people where they're at, both in person and on Zoom in every way we can. And then the last one that's on Zoom, we'll also record and send that out too, just to try to give everyone out there as many tools as possible to get their questions answered. So with that, that's kind of the background why we're here tonight, to talk this through and let you guys ask questions if you have any. And with that, I'd turn over to Lorenzo to
Thanks.
jump in.
How do I share my?
I can do it here. This thing came off.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. I think I remember everyone's faces here, but for those that don't remember me, Lorenzo Di Matteo with Brown and Brown, we're the benefits consultants working with the district. So this is obviously an exciting time, all the work, that hard work that's been done from the district's administration team, and really a lot of others involved here to get to the point where we are. So as Aaron alluded to, open enrollment is kicking off, and open enrollment from a benefit perspective is an opportunity for staff to evaluate benefits that are being offered effective January 1 of 2023, ask questions, and ultimately go through and make their election for the new plan year. So from an agenda perspective, what I just want to go over today is just talk through, I guess, a reminder from what I hit on what open enrollment is, what that process is going to look like from a staff perspective. Talk through, just as a reminder, again, of all the changes that are happening for 2023. So what's new, and also just a reminder of what's staying the same. There's plenty of consistency as well with change. And then just overall provide a high level summary of the medical prescription drug plan that's offered for 2023. Just show you what the employee premiums look like. Talk through some of the resources that United Healthcare is going to be providing to district employees to help answer questions that may come up during open enrollment prior to January 1st. And then ultimately, open up for questions, but feel free along the way to raise your hand, ask questions as I'm going through the presentation. So just as a reminder, again, as I referenced, open enrollment's a time for staff employees to make changes. The effective date of changes are January 1 of 2023. Open enrollment will begin on October 31st. So that will be the first date, staff will have an opportunity to go into the enrollment system and make changes. But as I'll talk to in a second, we are going to have communications in a meeting prior to that date for employees to ask questions. Enrollment is going to run through November 18th. So really plenty of time to make election changes, but at the same time, generally don't want to give too much time as you may assume a lot of people like to wait until the last minute to make their election. So try to keep it a big enough window, but not too large. In terms of the benefit decision, so this is going to be an active enrollment, meaning that employees are going to need to go into the enrollment system and make an active election in order for the benefits to be in effect for January 1. There's a lot of reasons for this, but really with the changes we have coming up with United Healthcare, we want employees and staff members to be engaged and understand the benefits that they're electing, and to really do that and understand that we know if they're going through that process if they're making an active election. And then, as I mentioned, there is an online benefit enrollment tool. So gone with the days of paper enrollments, employees have the opportunity to go into a system, see the benefits they have today, and then elect benefits moving forward.
Just a clarification quick, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lorenzo, that in previous years, given that our health insurance provider hadn't changed, employees, if their election wasn't going to change, it would default, meaning that they would not have to participate. And given that we are changing, I do believe all employees are required to this year.
Correct.
Is that
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Just a quick note to make, yeah.
So that will be a little bit different of a change. I know we had a benefit enrollment, benefit educators in last year to help educate on some of the new benefits that were rolled out as well. But on this slide, just overviewing the meeting dates that we're going to be that we're going to have to really educate members on the benefits as well as the enrollment process. So the first date actually is tomorrow at the Recreation Center. And then Monday, the 31st, there'll be another meeting that morning. And that actually is the first day of open enrollment, meaning the first day employees can make a change or their election. And then 2 other dates noted there. You'll notice that last date, November 10th, is a Zoom meeting. So that'll be a virtual presentation that Aaron had mentioned, recording that presentation. So I'll say there's a spouse that couldn't make the presentations. That way they'll have an opportunity to review those as well. In terms of support that's going to be provided during these meetings. So the Brown and Brown team is going to be in participation. United Healthcare is going to be on site as well to present. The district staff administration team will be there as well. And then for some of the meetings, Reliance Standard, who's the new short-term and long-term disability carrier, is going to be present to help answer questions. So a portion of the time noted here is going to be specific for presenting, and then a large portion of the time is just going to be available to help answer questions that may come up. And then I'll get into later in the presentation some additional tools and resources that UHC is going to provide to your employees. So in terms of what's new for 2023, as we've talked about with WEA going out of business, the change to United Healthcare for medical and prescription drug coverage. There are really no changes to the deductibles and out-of-pockets. Those are the same as they have been with WEA. What actually is a benefit enhancement, though, is United Healthcare is removing tier 4 prescription drug copays. So today, there's a higher cost associated with specialty drugs or tier 4 from a member cost share perspective. That's actually going to be removed. So there's going to be 3 tiers, tier 1, 2, and 3, which is going to be an enhancement to district staff and their family members. As we've talked about in previous meetings, there's obviously a decrease in medical premiums. Vitality is the well-being program administrator that WEA partnered with. That is going to be transitioning to a number of different United Healthcare well-being programs that are available and that UHC is going to talk about in more detail. However, just a reminder to staff that we'll talk through is that there's an opportunity to earn points in Vitality that can be redeemed for rewards. Employees will want to redeem those rewards by December 31st in order to receive them. So just so that doesn't get lost in the transition process, I want to make that known. And then the change from Madison National Life to Reliance Standard, as I mentioned earlier, for short-term disability and long-term disability, that's going to provide an opportunity. Though short-term disability is voluntary and it's 100% employee paid, employees will be able to make an election during open enrollment, excuse me, with Reliance Standard without having to go through any type of medical underwriting process. So in the past, employee had waived at the time of hire, they'd have to go through medical underwriting. With the case with Reliance Standard, that won't be a requirement. So hopefully a lot more enrollment that we'll see moving forward in that benefit, as it is a valuable one. And then what's staying the same for 2023? So there's no change in the dental plan that continues to be administered through Delta Dental. Today, very unique and rich benefit. It's paid at 100% for active eligible employees. For retirees, the cost is going up by 5.7%. That's just based on the self-funded plan and projected future increase. There is no change to the vision plan designs or premiums. Voluntary benefits administered through AFLAC continue to be the same, no change in cost. And then the EAP, Employee Assistance Program Administrators, FEI, continues to be the administrator for the Employee Assistance Program. So again, I know there are a number of changes that we've talked through, but a lot is also staying the same, which should be viewed as a positive. And then as it relates to the medical and prescription drug plan with United Healthcare, just a quick slide. Again, a reminder that there's no changes to those deductibles and out-of-pockets that base plan and buy-up plan as noted on the slide. And then I just have noted again, removing that tier 4 copay. And then the different premiums are shown here. These are monthly costs for those that participated in biometric health screening and those that do not participate. Overall, again, the reduction is different depending on the tier and the plan, but all these are a reduction on average or are reduced from the current premiums. And then in terms of really what's the same between the current WEA plan and with United Healthcare, just a slide that's going to be presented to staff, and want to reiterate it here to the school board today that there are no referrals required from a primary care physician to a specialist. So more traditional HMO model that was a requirement. Now today with the plan, it's not and will not be a requirement, although we always do suggest and recommend employees and their family members have a designated primary care physician. Both plans continue to have out-of-network coverage. United Healthcare has a large nationwide network. So in terms of access to providers, both here in the state of Wisconsin and across the country, generally access on that end. As I mentioned, there's no primary care physician required, but obviously strongly recommended. And then both plans continue to have really a great pharmacy benefits available to employees.
One thing I want to note, if you can go back a slide, Lorenzo.
Yep.
So if it's hard to read, but on the right, there's the buy-up plan. And if you go all the way down, you see a number 312.74 for a family. So that buy-up plan and I want to mention this because it's a huge decrease. So that buy-up plan allows a staff member who has a family to elect to pay $312 a month for in-network deductible of $1,000, right? Last year under WEA, that same plan cost that same staff member $445.
Yeah,
So-
it's $500 deduct. Oh, sorry, for the family. Yeah,
family,
yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
So that's, I mean, someone who is looking for that same deductible this year will be very pleased to see that, to save almost $130 a month on that. So that's really great, I think. And every plan saw a decrease, but that is it's something to note. So just want to mention that.
What's the main difference with the buy-up plan? Just the deductible?
The deductible. Yeah.
Deductible and that the out-of-pocket maximum as well. So just the max liability, but it's mainly co-pays that are attached to that. So thank you, Aaron, for making that comment.
Yeah.
And then as I mentioned, United Healthcare is providing a number of additional resources for employees and their staff to evaluate the benefits that are being offered just outside of the traditional open enrollment presentation. So one of these resources is actually a pre-member website. So this is a custom website developed for the benefits they're offering for West Dallas, West Milwaukee. This is before the January 1st effective date where employees and their family members can go in, really just better understand their medical and prescription drug benefits. They can compare the two plans that we've talked about on a side-by-side basis. They can look to see if their current physician is in network, check to see if a medication they're on is covered and what tier it's covered under. And then also just learn about all the additional well-being and condition management programs available through United Healthcare. So that's, again, one additional resource that's a little unique and typically not available. That type of information is not available until after you're enrolled in coverage. And then in addition to that, they're actually providing a separate phone number that employees and staff members can call to ask questions prior to the effective period of January 1st. So for example, you feel more comfortable calling to find out if your doctor's in network, or you're looking to have assistance in finding an in-network doctor, you could call United Healthcare for that. You just have questions related to your prescription drug coverage, questions related to prior authorization, whether that be for a prescription or an upcoming procedure that you have coming up. So really, between the open enrollment presentations and United Healthcare being on site, the pre-member website, and this phone number, a number of different resources that United Healthcare is committed to help answer questions prior to open enrollment, and obviously after open enrollment, a number of websites and phone numbers available to call with questions as well. So with that, I just want to ask if there are any questions from the school board. Again, wanted to provide you a summary of really what's going to be happening during the open enrollment process, as well as the resources available.
Questions?
I appreciate how many meetings and opportunities people will have for questions.
And I appreciate holding one of those meetings during the staff development time. That was key. That's it's just considerate.
Yeah, we're hoping the breakfast will help too. So.
Food always works.
I have a few questions. I know when we were getting this presentation, there was the discussion about the fast care clinics.
Yep.
And if we were going to include those or not. Are those, I didn't see them in the list, are they included?
So the relationship with Freighter for the clinic is effective April 1, so not January 1st. So we've not gone through and communicated any of that yet, unless that's come internally, but we actually, so Brown and Brown just this week received the draft agreements with Freighter, and that was one of them. So just in terms of, we're in the process of evaluating those right now, and then we'll send it over to the district, and then there'll be more discussion on
The
it.
intent is to do it, absolutely. And the reason that we're able financially to do that is really United Healthcare's commitment of $750,000 for that. And now we know that Freighter's costs for the year won't be anywhere near that. So increasing that amount will still allow us, we'll still have some dollars to use, and we're working through with United Healthcare how we can access those and things like that. But more to come from that, but absolutely it'll be included.
And I would, I know we talked about evaluating usage to determine if the cost is worthwhile or if it's too well used. If then, because we talked, there could be a cost basically that we could charge, the employees for utilizing it if it's something that is super usage. So just making sure that we're keeping that in mind. We're not, because obviously every year costs go up, and so we want to make sure that this is a benefit that is, if it's well used, that we're able to afford it in the long term. And I think if there was a nominal cost for doing it, that it would still probably get a lot of usage, but it'll obviously get the most usage when it's free. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. And then also the data from those visits to determine how much of that could have been used during in our wellness center. So I know I used it most on a weekend or after hours, which also would the wellness center would be a similar situation. We would not be able to use that on the weekends or after hours. But is that the case? Are people going during the day when they could have gone to the wellness center instead? Because we obviously want to drive people there first, if possible, for prescription drugs as well as for those kind of general maintenance or annual visits, because it's going to cost the district less money that way as opposed to going through the insurance.
We look forward to that as well, because one of the main issues we had with Everside, our current provider, was getting access to that specific data to try to make informed decisions.
Yes.
And so I would agree. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll have access to that.
So I think that would be very, very important. And if we can include, is there a way to include what you can go to wellness center along with this information we're providing them about the new healthcare benefits? So they can see like, yes, I have this covered, but I can also go to the wellness center for that too. To just kind of remind people now that everyone is being driven to have to go and sign up for these benefits if they want them. What our wellness center is offering currently, and maybe even a note that it's going to be changing in April to Freighter at that point in time.
That might be a nice value
Yeah.
add to the end to
Yeah.
have, yeah, we can certainly build that in. So it's a good idea.
Okay. That's a lot of things I had. Any questions that came from that?
I like how you said maintenance. I'm a walking, but I didn't have maintenance done.
Well, that's what they call it. Okay, well, if nothing more, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of our employees and ensuring that they have every opportunity to ask questions and feel comfortable about this transition. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we have lots of motions in 1 second, so that's good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.